When I read about food forest abundance, I was curious about what they actually did. My research led me to founder Jim Gale's love for not only designing growing food for functionality, but also making it look beautiful in the process. With a high-end off-the-grid resort in St. Cloud, Florida, Galt's Landing, and the Freedom Farm Academy, Jim is teaching that everything on the earth has a job, and when we let nature work, the end result is abundance. Now, let's get to business. Hello, everyone. I am your host, Tatiana Ryan, and this is the Businessy Podcast. And I am here today with Jim Gale, founder of the Food Forest Abundance Initiative. Jim, how are you?
I'm doing well, Tatiana. It's a pleasure to be here sharing with you and your audience the solution to all of the world's biggest problems.
Oh my goodness. And I am so excited to talk about this because it is such a simple subject that people aren't really doing. And we talked about the rabbit hole. We may reach on that, but we have got so much other subjects to hit right now. So let's start with how you started. Because when you started, before Food Forest Abundance became about, you actually started another company and you had a huge goal in mind. Start telling us about that.
Sounds good. Well, it started with, growing up, they called me Nature Boy. I love nature. I grew up on a lake and I was always in knee deep in the mud and fishing and all that stuff. So it's always been a passion of mine to be out there with nature. And then I went through college wrestling, which was kind of relevant because it's where I learned about setting an inspiring vision for myself. In fact, my college wrestling coach said to all of the team, you have to write your goals and have them on my desk by Monday, or you're not allowed to come to practice on Monday. And I was like, oh, what a pain in the butt, because it involved a pen and paper, and I did not like school. School was, to me, not very inspiring. So when I finally started writing my goals on Sunday night, because I was a major procrastinator, then I started dreaming. I started visualizing based on the questions that were in the papers that he gave us. I started asking the questions, what can I achieve in my future and how will that feel, right? The feeling is the gateway to the doing. So as I started reading these questions and going internal, right? Because that's where it all happens. The previous 2 years, by the way, I was horrible. I had failed in every goal because I didn't really have goals that were written and thoughtful. Anyway, I wrote that I wanted to be a three-time All-American and national champion. And when I handed my goals to my wrestling coach, he smirked. He was internally laughing and he was shaking his head saying, this is impossible. Well, I've seen that so many times in my life where people think that somebody else's vision is impossible, but that means nothing. It's what we conceive and believe that makes it possible or not. Anyway, 4 years later, I was a four-time All-American and national champion, inducted into the Hall of Fame, thanks to the vision. Anybody can do this. Everybody can create an inspiring vision for themselves. And when we do that, then life changes incredibly. So 10 years later, I wrote my goals for the second time after living in Hawaii for 4 years and traveling around the world in a backpack. I was dead broke. And the first thing we want when we're broke is to make money. At least that was what I wanted when I was 29 years old. So I wrote my goals again after studying the greats, the Zig Ziglar and Jim Rohn and Dennis Waitley's psychology of winning. And I really immersed myself in these new ideas that I did not learn in school, by the way. School taught me none of this stuff. So I wrote my goals that I wanted to have $3 million in 3 years. And at the time, my dad was a pipe fitter. My mom was a stay-at-home mom growing up. So that was so much money to me. That was the limit of what I could conceive and believe. And then through a series of kind of coincidental events, right, cooperative incidences, I ended up starting a mortgage company that did $1.3 billion in revenue in 3.5 years. And then I bought a boat and lived on the ocean for a year.
How did you keep that self-discipline? Because that was very self-inflicted. Like you wanted this, so you had to stay motivated.
Tatiana, that's such a great question. When we write a goal and we live in our minds and our bodies and our feelings into that scene, there's no discipline needed. I simply enjoyed every minute of the process. In fact, that's some of the times that's discipline is really unsustainable. Effort is unsustainable, but joy is completely sustainable.
And with that, after you reached that status, you started to travel the world. You started to experience different civilizations and how they lived. What did you come up with in some sort of a master plan that is different than what Americans are doing right now?
It sure is. And it's interesting. I traveled the world. I went around the world twice. The first time I went around the world on a backpacker's budget of $10 a day type of thing. I was living in youth hostels with, sometimes 20 other people in a room. And I enjoyed that trip way more than the trip I took after I made a bunch of money, where I was staying by myself in fancy, $300 a night hotels, which at the time, back 25 years ago, 30, those were like really nice hotels. Now those same rooms would probably be $800. But anyway, so the trip where I was backpacking on the budget, I got to meet so many people. I lived in Africa with the Maasai on the Masai Mara. And I was able to experience their culture, which is completely regenerative for the most part. They did have some students from their community going to college and coming back wearing different clothes and having a different energy about them. They lost their connection to the land in a way by learning all these things taught in colleges and universities. In fact, just a side note, the agricultural system, which we'll get into in a bit, that is taught in colleges and universities around the world is the most destructive teaching in the history of the world. It's all backwards. But anyway, back to the Maasai, I was able to live one day there was a party that they had. And I was invited to this party. And we walked across the Masai Mara. We woke up and it was still dark out. We were literally laying in the grass. And I didn't sleep very well that night because you could hear the hyenas and the zebras and sometimes the lions in the distance. And there's no fences, right? In fact, the Maasai were telling stories, and they told the story to a bunch of tourists there that when they go out on a lion hunt as a rite of passage to become a man, right? Which is, it is what it is, right? That's their cultural thing. Then when they corner a lion, sometimes the lion is injured. The lion will look at every Maasai in the eye, and it will attack the one that's the most scared. Well, there's a lot of relevance to their culture in that story, and I was scared. So I'm thinking, oh my God, we're walking through the dark in the Masai Mara with all these animals, and I'm like pretending not to be scared. It was quite a moment.
Well, they told you that before you went.
Yeah.
I know I'm the one on the list, right?
I knew that, hey, let's bring this guy, then none of us will get eaten.
Well, experiencing all of those cultures, and then you came back to America and you started the Food Forest Abundance, which tell people about what the plan is, because it's not your everyday run-of-the-mill landscaping company.
Yeah. So one of the books that I read that was most relevant in my life was Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Napoleon Hill was commissioned to study the most successful entrepreneurs and manifestors in the world. And after a lifetime of study of these amazing people, he deducted whatever your mind can conceive and believe it can achieve. That's a big statement. It's infinite, it's limitless. So I've been playing with that now for the last 20 years. And I've been asking myself, okay, what can I conceive and believe? And when you go down that path obsessively, right? And when I say obsessively, for when I first learned about in 2007, I learned what was going on in the world. I learned who was controlling the world, and I learned the solution to all of it. And I had my first two daughters. I've got 4 baby girls, well, 18, 17, 14, and 4 now. But I went through a period of scarcity. Obsession is a scarcity-driven energy. So I went through this obsession. My question was, how do we change this? How do we catalyze a shift in awareness that leads to mass adoption of simply taking the poisons out of our lives and using our resources, our energy wisely? And that obsession took me from $20 million in net worth to negative $80,000. I invested everything that I had, every bit of energy, financial and otherwise, into how do we change this? And it was very stressful. About 2.5 years ago, I was negative 80,000. I was at the end of my credit line, and we had bills to pay, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And it was one of the most stressful times of my life. And then I was reading something from one of my many teachers, and it was about faith and courage and frequency and kind of the law of attraction type of stuff. And I had tried everything else. So I let it go. I literally took a deep breath. I remember the step I took. I remember exactly where I was when I was crying, and I let it all go. And everything illuminated. It was dark outside, but all of a sudden I could see better than I could the minute beforehand. I let go of the fear. I let go of the scarcity. I let go of the obsession. And I decided at that moment that I was going to pursue this with complete faith and courage. And ever since then, the universe has opened up a pathway it's divine.
When you created this company to go into different places, say restaurants or farms or whatever, and create they're in little mini environments for everything, for plants, for fruits and vegetables, for nuts, and not only for everything else, but also for insects, for animals, for abundance for other people to have food instead of just a landscape environment, which is great.
Yeah.
But you came up with this completely different idea.
Well, it's actually the oldest idea in the book. It's the vision of, there's different ways to look at this, right? Different perspectives, depending on what we believe, right? One perspective, one vision that most people have a vision of is the Garden of Eden. What would it feel like to be standing in the Garden of Eden, right? It's a food forest. It's a permaculture designed edible landscape, right? So for different perspectives, those are different ways to look at this. It's a place of epic abundance. It's a place where, like at my house, I've got 230 different types of edible plants, food producing plants growing all around, and they are perennial plants. Perennials are plants that you plant once and they continuously produce more abundance for generations, sometimes even thousands of years to come. So, and there's flowers everywhere. There's butterflies and hummingbirds and bees, and there's no poisons. There's no need for any poisons or any chemicals in a diversified perennial edible landscape or a food forest. It balances itself out. That's what nature does. So I walk outside and I can have a big, huge basket full of food that takes no maintenance in 5 minutes.
That's the amazing thing, because I recently just had Emma Kaufman, who is a livestock analyst, on talking about the livestock industry. And she goes into schools and she's amazed because a lot of kids don't know where their food comes from. They say, oh, okay, from aisle 6 at the Acme,
You're so right. And so we look at this whole system, and now with all of the TV shows and movies coming, and all of the different energy that's coming, like we launched 26 months ago, and we are now in 54 countries and every US state, helping people, inspiring and empowering people to use their land and their energy wisely. Right? It's so simple. It's just as easy to manage or maintain an apple, a peach, a plum, a pear, an avocado, depending on what zone you're in, as it is to manage an oak, a birch, a willow, or any of these other trees. The difference is profound. The difference is food that's free at your fingertips once you have the system installed.
Each part of the food forest itself has their own little job. The bugs, the worms, the flies, the bees, everything has its own job where you don't need all of those harsh chemicals.
It's absolutely amazing. We've been taught to buy poisons to kill the very bugs that are our best allies in the garden, right? So the other day, now this is about 6 months ago, I was walking through our food forest and just observing and interacting and feeling the life. You can feel the frequency of it. It's profound. And I noticed we have some perennial spinaches. We have longevity spinach and Okinawa spinach and sweet potato leaves, which are incredibly edible, moringa and cranberry hibiscus, and on and on and on. So I'm walking through this Garden of Eden paradise, and I see a plant that had a moth must have laid some eggs there, and the caterpillars had taken out, completely eaten one of the areas of spinach. And then I go, oh, that's interesting. I wonder what that's going to be like tomorrow. The next day I went, and the next plant over was about a third eaten. And then I go, oh, cool. I wonder what's going on here. And I noticed there was a spider web, and I noticed the wasps flying around. The next day I come, 3 or 4 days in, and I see this massive amount of there's spiders and geckos and wasps. And there's almost no more larvae, no more caterpillars eating the garden. It's nature's perfect balance. So we actually have beneficial insect releases where we will release ladybugs and different types like praying mantises into our food forest, and they'll manage the food forest for us instead of using poisons that kill life on our planet.
Now, you are situated down in Florida.
Yes.
So everybody knows where you're stationed at. Now, you also have another project called Galt's Landing. Tell us about that.
Yes. So Galt's Landing is a completely off-grid homestead that produces all of its own food, water, and energy. And it's truly a demonstration site for how the world will be. We will catalyze a shift, not by talking about how it works, not by, getting out there and demanding it. We will catalyze a shift by demonstrating how awesome it is at scale all around the world, right? Every single off-grid homestead, every single food forest literally becomes a seed of abundance, an energy production system. People say that there isn't free energy. They don't know what they're talking about. There's free energy everywhere all the time. It's a matter of how do we harvest and design those free energy systems into our lives. It's life by design. So Galt's Landing is the purpose of Galt's is not only to have an incredible life. We have volleyball courts, sand volleyball courts. We have a tennis court. We have a private 430-acre lake and a runway, a mile-long paved runway. My partner's a pilot. All of this stuff has miraculously come together. But the core of it is everybody can have a food forest. If you have land, or if you have a friend or a parent or a neighbor or a brother or an uncle that has land, you can start using that land. And then, this is one of the most profound concepts. You can count the seeds in a single apple, but you cannot count the apples in a single seed. One seed can produce millions and billions and infinite amount of apples over time.
Galt's Landing is actually a resort. So when you plan a food forest, Do you work with chefs and sommeliers and any kind of different person who's in different types of businesses who may want a food forest for their own business themselves?
Yes, that's exactly what we do. So we design and install. We have attracted a group of incredible permaculture designers who design food forests based on the agricultural zone. And this is really important. A lot of people hear that I'm in Florida, and the first thing they say is, I'm in Arizona, I'm in Minnesota, I'm in Poland, I'm in Russia. I can't do this on my land. Nope. That's BS. That's belief systems, and they're wrong. In fact, my friend in northern Minnesota, his food forest makes mine look like a baby. He's been at it about 5 years, where we've been at it about 2.5. And he has 300 different species of edible and medicinal plants growing. And what's happened is all of these animals, he's got like 4 types of turtles and 7 types of frogs. He's got birds that have never been documented in the United States living in his Garden of Eden, in his food forest. So this can be done anywhere in the world, the permaculture design process, anywhere. So what we do is we find out what the customer, what the person, the steward, we call them, is looking for, what their vision is, what their goals are. And then we design those goals into their food forest. Some are for restaurants, some are for churches, some are for schools and prisons. We're going to be going into a local prison now, and we're putting a food forest in a local prison.
You started the Freedom Farm Academy. Now, does that tie into going into the prisons and bringing more educational awareness and possibly helping with behavior problems? Because then people have something to look forward to. They know they're actually creating something when they get involved in food forestry.
Yes, this is a profound and incredibly logical solution to prison reform. In fact, this will end the majority of crime in 4 years. And what am I talking about? When the prisoners, the inmates, learn the ethics and the principles of permaculture, which stands for permanent culture. It's a sustainable cultural science that has the ethics of do no harm and reinvest the surplus and earth care, and then all of these incredible 12 principles. When the inmates learn these principles and create life, when they start growing their own food, not only will they be eating poison-free food, because right now in prisons, the food is laced with and grown with poisons. You know, Dr. Goodall said, we shall look back on this dark era of agriculture and shake our heads and wonder how we ever thought it was a good idea to grow our foods with poisons, right? So anyway, the inmates will learn this science. They'll collaborate to create all of their own food. The savings just on the tax, just on the food piece of it alone, will be incredible. But then they will also become healthier. Most inmates are diseased and traumatized. So when we start ingesting nutrient-dense foods, we start healing our stomachs, our brains, and our bodies, and we are more functional in society. But here's the big one. This has been done before. It's not a hypothetical solution to prison reform. It's a proven solution. So when all of our prisons start doing this, in the one case, the recidivism rate, which means reincarceration or inmates that leave prison and commit another felony and go back to prison, it went down by 75% for the inmates that participated in these programs.
Taking this into schools also and getting more and more schools involved in this. So not only the kids know where their food came from, but as you said, they take a part into growing it themselves and eating it themselves and being proud of what they're doing. Do you think that'll help the next generation with their problems?
It will change the world, radically and abundantly and joyfully change the world. And here's exactly how. We put a food forest at a local school. The students now are learning not only where their food's coming from, but they're eating healthy food. It's the same as the inmates. So imagine that we had one of these candidates running for the presidency of the United States. And imagine one of them ran on the platform of using our resources wisely, taking the poisons out of the school lunches and the school land, and then the students grow their own food. Now, many people listening think this is hard or complicated. Many people think that this is farming. This is not farming. This is designing our land to be infinitely productive. So when the prison systems put food forests in the prisons, when the school systems use the same resources, by the way, we're not talking about new taxation. We're talking about using the same resources, which will result in massive tax savings. Then every school becomes a nursery for their community. The kids grow all of their own food, and the community, the seeds of abundance go out everywhere.
That's one thing I'm really happy about with our new governor, Josh Shapiro, is really pushing agriculture and vocational education a lot in Pennsylvania. I'm really, really proud of that. But how can somebody get involved in your initiative with the food forest, the Galt's Landing, if they want to visit Galt's Landing, and also the Freedom Farm Academy?
Yes. So our Freedom Farm Academy at Galt's Landing, a Freedom Farm is simply an off-grid homestead that produces all of its own food, water, and energy, and also demonstrates and educates the community. It becomes the community nursery. It's an incredibly joyful pursuit. I'm so happy walking around and sharing the abundance with our community. And the community then becomes our supporters. Right? We are very much into this idea of freedom and how freedom means service to our community. And the service becomes one of our best assets. So people can get involved if you want to. Let's say you have $20 and you simply want to grow your own food, but you're on a really tight budget. Here's exactly how you do it. You take that $20, you go to the store and you buy fruits and veggies that you like with seeds in them, or that are able to simply put in the ground like spuds or potatoes. You cut some off, you go and you can find soil all over the place. You get some buckets if you've got a condo or an apartment, or if you've got land, you put those in the ground. You might fail at first, but it didn't cost you anything except for an extra 20 minutes of effort, right? But the plants are the best teachers. They teach awareness and interaction with nature and patience. So you could literally start with nothing, and within a year or two, you could have an epic garden and an epic food forest. Or if you want to speed up time, like most people nowadays, including me, by the way, then you can have one of our permaculture designers design your landscape to be a food productive paradise. And if you want to go to the next level, if you want to go completely off grid and create this Freedom Farm Academy that has, by the way, multiple layers, we believe in regenerative capitalism, which is the voluntary exchange of value, not forced. So if you want to be involved, there's multiple layers and benefits to be living this way and then helping our communities live this way as well.
And I will also link everything in the description of the podcast so people can connect right with everything. Where can people follow you on social media and see what you're doing, what plans you guys have going on, or what things you're working on with converting into like food forests?
All right. So we are at foodforestabundance.com. We have a strategy session where anybody listening can go online and sign up for a strategy session, which is free, where a professional permaculture designer will chat with you for 30 minutes about how you can start growing food. Then, if you're inspired to do so, you can also purchase a design, and then one of our designers will work with you to design your landscape to be productive. And we're on all over social media at Food Forest Abundance on multiple channels.
That's so awesome. And it's so great that you're doing this, and in not only taking landscaping, but putting food into people's landscaping, because what a great way to, have an apple right outside your door, have oranges, have lemons, have everything that you can put into your own dishes that you create.
Yes, everything. I mean, our fence is a food fence. We've got grapes and passion fruit. We've got raspberries, blueberries, and blackberries, and mulberries, and strawberries, and you name it, peaches and plums and apples and pears. All of it can be in your yard if you have a yard. And when you walk out there, you will smile and you will feel the abundance.
Well, you'll also be teaching the next generations also where their food comes from.
Yes, it's infinite, it's exponential, and it's a lot of fun. We have TV shows coming out. Modern Homestead is coming on Discovery, and we've been featured in that. We've got another show, a movie, a documentary coming out. You know, Victor Hugo said there's one thing stronger than all of the armies of the world, and that is an idea whose time has come. My friends, this is it.
Tell us about this new show on Discovery Channel.
Yeah. Oh, it's going to be fantastic. It's called Modern Homestead. And our partners, Evan and Jana, it's their show. And they found out about us and they came to Galt's Landing. And by the way, if anybody wants to visit, we have like an Airbnb. It's at galtswalks.com. So it's GALTSWALKS.com. And people can come and stay for a few days or a week, and they can experience walking out the door, getting eggs from the chickens. The honey we produce on our 2 little hives is fantastic. You can walk into the food forest, you can harvest the guavas and all the different foods, and you can experience what it's like to live this way. So anyway, they came and they were so blown away that we've become partners. And with their platforms and our platforms, and now we've got generals and colonels and super movie stars and all these different people coalescing around this idea, because this solves all the narratives. This reverses all sorts of issues that are happening in our world: mass extinction, deforestation, cancer, diabetes, and heart disease trends. This ends world hunger and it ends tyranny simply by taking the poisons out and using our land.
But it's also a lot of commitment also, which like you said, you go out your door and you have the experience, but this is an everyday process also for people that are doing this.
It's the most joyful thing we could ever do. And here's the part that I really want to convey. I could walk away from the food forest around my house for 30 years. We could do zero maintenance on this food forest. And in 30 years, not only would these trees be epic and massively productive, and all the bushes and stuff, some of the understory bushes would be competed out because the canopy would fill in and there would not be sun reaching the understory. But the overstory would be just a dripping with food everywhere. So not only would that be the case, but a food forest is expansive. The wind, the rain, the animals, and the birds come in and they spread the seeds for miles and miles and hundreds of miles. So that's why putting these seeds of abundance, these food forests all over the world, it's an expansive technology that will just feed the world.
So glad I got you on here today to talk about all of this, because it's so easy to do. And as you said, it keeps coming back every year. You don't have to plant more flowers every year. You have the fruits and vegetables that are coming back to you.
Totally. And if you want it to be a fancy HOA design landscape, that's what we do. If you want it to be like mine's literally a jungle of food. I love it that way. Other people want it to have very tight manicure. Whatever you choose, that's what you can do. The manicured lawn is going to be the same as an ornamental landscape for maintenance, where the food forest is zero maintenance. But again, it's whatever the personal preference is. Like sometimes the HOAs say, I don't want a food forest, no. And then when we show them the design of their food forest, then they say, oh, that's beautiful. And they stamp it approved, right? So it can be done however the steward wants it done. And yeah, it's wonderful.
That's amazing to know also that you work with HOAs, and say somebody is in more of a city setting and they're actually thinking of putting this food forest like on a rooftop or something. So you work with that also for their business. Say they have a restaurant in a city.
Exactly. We can help people grow food in whatever their circumstance, whether it's an indoor closet setup, it's a deck setup, it's a rooftop. Now, the best ROI, right? The best return on energy invested is the soil, building soil. And then with the principles, one of the first things, and a lot of people are having issues with water nowadays. We don't want to water our food forest with city water. City water has all sorts of toxins in it. We should not be drinking it without significant filters, and we don't want the plants drinking it either. So we design in sometimes water catchment systems, sometimes ponds. In fact, my pond, we dug a 3.5 acre pond, and it's 25 feet deep. It's a really significant pond. We put 7 species of fish in the pond: sunnies and crappies and bass and catfish, mosquito minnows, fatheads, and shiners. And now we use the water from the pond on a solar timer, right? So we set it up, and the energy on the upfront was significant. But after that, it's automated. So the water is sucked from the pond, and it has that fish nutrient in it, that effluent, and then that goes into the food forest, and it fertilize and irrigate. Now, if you don't have space for a pond, you can do a water catchment thing off of your gutters. And then the best way, though, to store water is right in the landscape itself. So what our engineers have done over the last several generations, we have designed our gutters to take the water out of our landscape and to put it in pipes and to ship it off to the closest ocean or lake or river. That is insane. What we do is we design earthworks. So we might build a swale. Some swales, like in the deserts of Jordan, they're miles long, right? And they're maybe 10, 15, even 30 feet wide. A swale is simply a ditch on contour, and then you put compost in that. And then when the rain event comes, like in Jordan, it might rain once every 2 years, the rains will come, and typically that water will actually wash away nutrients and it will drain off somewhere. Well, in these events, it's the swale slows down the water, so the water sinks and spreads into the landscape. So this is what we do in properties where we create these earthworks. They could be this big, right? They could be that wide, right? So they don't have to be big. But when the rain comes, it'll go into the land, and then your land becomes a water battery.
Well, you were talking about not only working with the food of the plants themselves, but also the nature within the animals also.
Yes.
What happens when you're in a setting like in Pennsylvania and you want a food forest, but you attract a lot of deer?
Yes.
Do you work with some of the plants that will kind of deter the deer from eating everything else?
100%. So deer are a big concern. And one of the reasons why is because a lot of these areas no longer have apex predators. So the deer in HOAs are literally starving. There's not much to eat there. So when they see some food, even right on your windowsill on a flower box, they'll come right up to your window and eat it because they're hungry, right? So in those cases, in areas like that, then fencing is awesome. And here's the fun function of a fence. Most people just have a fence, but we turn every fence into a food fence. So not only is it a fence, but it's a trellis. So we put vining plants on the bottom, and those vining plants will crawl up the fence, and they'll turn the whole fence green within 2 or 3 years. And of course, also provide a lot of food. So that's one solution. There's also dogs. There's also different types of plants. Like my buddy in Minnesota, he has a raspberry, right? It's a raspberry hedge that's probably 50, 60 feet long, kind of circle like in a U shape, and it protects other areas of his farm. And this thing is probably 7 or 8 feet tall, and you can't see through it. I don't even know how thick it is, but moose don't even walk through that raspberry.
Now, this is actually getting more interesting now, because if you are to design something like that, you could actually design a little place for the deer to eat.
Yes.
Something that will attract them. Okay, you guys can have this, but please don't touch this.
Yeah, that is so exactly right. We want deer in our community. We are omnivores. We believe in being the stewards of the land and helping to maintain the balance of the land. Now, nature will balance itself out if we leave it alone, right? So, but we being there and conscious of our environment, we can help manage, and then we can harvest. So eventually we have chickens, we have cows, we have fish. Eventually, we'll probably have some pigs, and every one of those animals becomes an asset to the food forest itself. The waste from those animals, the chickens, when you let chickens out in a certain area, if you have the right amount of chickens and you let them out for the right amount of time, they will actually be a massive benefit. The first thing that the chickens will eat are the bugs and the wood ticks and a lot of the things that destroy the food forest in the garden. So if you leave them out for too long, then the chickens will eat the garden itself. But it's about becoming aware of where that balance is. And then if we have too many chickens, we'll eat some chickens.
That's what people don't understand, is that each and every from little bug to humans to even the larger animals, has its own place in everything. And when you let nature take its course, nature takes its course.
It does. It does. One of the most fascinating stories is when they reintroduced wolves to Yellowstone National Park. I think it was about 25 years ago, maybe 30 years ago. So they had killed all the wolves in Yellowstone. And the buffalo and the other ruminants, the other herbivores, the deer and the elk were literally destroying. And they were, the course of the rivers literally changed thanks to the reintroduction of the wolves, because the wolves started balancing things out again. The wolves population shot up really fast, and then it started coming down because it created that balance again. Right? So that's what we need back in our world. Number one, we take the poisons out. No more poisons on our land, on our lawns. You know, there are over 44 million acres of lawn in the United States alone. The lawn takes more poisons, more chemicals, and more human resources than any other crop, and it does not provide food. The lawn is the physical foundation of our disease and enslavement in humanity.
Wow, this has been an amazing conversation. It really has. And like I said, I'm so glad I brought you on to talk about what the food forest does, and also to explain to people that we need those bugs. We can't kill them off. We need the worms. We need the flies. We need the caterpillars, but we also need the birds. We also need the deer. We also need everything else. This has been an amazing conversation. Jim, I am so glad to have you here. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm Tatiana Ryan. This is the Businessy Podcast. If you want to get a hold of Jim in any way, shape, or form, everything will be linked in this podcast description itself, so you can just hit him up there. Thank you so much, Jim.
Thank you.
Have a great day.